All right, it's a very exciting week. We got some huge news to discuss in the arena football world today. But before we get into what we're discussing, let's go into who's here to discuss it. And we're going to start with Big Boy Sports. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll just work our way back up to me, and then go ahead and jump right into the conversation.
Good morning, everybody. Hope y'all are having a good one on Big Boy Sports. The weekly show I do is the This Week in Indoor Football show. So, hope y'all subscribe to me. Hope y'all subscribe to everybody here. And got a lot to talk about today. Got a lot to talk about. It's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. Bryce?
Hi, my name is Bryce Burge. I'm the former host of AFT Buzz and the current editor of the Munising Beacon in Munising, Michigan.
Once again, thanks for joining us. And then defense kid?
I'm the okay. I'm the Albany defense kid and This Week in Arena Ball. So I run the This Week in Arena Football Twitter account and YouTube, but I haven't really done anything on the YouTube side in a while. And then I'm also the Albany defense kid. So if you've watched any NAL like Albany games at home, you've probably seen me on the on the jumbotron and on the live stream. So yeah, that's it. Really.
I love that. And then Ralph, the voice of the gunslingers.
Well, that's all I have to say. No, I've I've been broadcasting for 15 years, only 2 years professionally. Both of those years with the AFL and the San Antonio Gunslingers. I'm a 55-year-old guy. I'm not really excited about social media. Somebody needs to tell me how to change my Twitter handle because it still references my the previous company I worked for. It is currently TSRN-SA, Texas Sports Radio Network San Antonio. We're now TSP, Texas Sports Productions. And yeah, I would love to change that to TSP, but I'm not sure how. That's what you get when you're old. You forget things, and you go with what you know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, let's go to the youngest member of the panel today, Chris.
Yeah, no, my name is Chris. You probably know me. You watch my videos. I got videos coming every day. I'm up here in Massachusetts, coaching intern with the best team in the AFL, Mass Pirates. But yeah, so.
Absolutely, and I'm just here to talk some football. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and get right into it. Obviously, the Arena Football League announced 16 cities that they will be putting teams in this upcoming year. And here's the graphic for anybody who didn't catch it. We've got Boise, Austin, Chicago, Louisiana, California, Colorado, Ohio, Orlando, Oregon, St. Louis, Minnesota, Tallahassee, Washington, West Texas, Philadelphia, and Tennessee. So let's real quick. What were your guys' initial thoughts on the cities that were announced, and any big snubs that you were excited to see or hoping to see in this list that did not turn up? Let's go to Big Boy first.
Well, I didn't really have. I was just kind of surprised in general. We knew that there were going to be 16 cities. We knew that's about all we really knew at the moment. I didn't know, what cities were going to be, and some of these are admittedly a little questionable. I don't know. We'll talk about it, but I don't really see any snubs here at the moment because I'm just. If it happens, it happens, and I'm excited for more football. If it doesn't, oh well.
That's completely fair. Well, with that being said, what are some of the surprises on this list for you?
Um, Definitely a Boise. That's definitely a surprise. I think Boise's really an area you really talk about when it comes to indoor football. And then of course, two very very surprising additions that we're going to talk about: Orlando, West Texas. Very surprising. There was the other one in California that was also kind of surprising. I think it was Bakersfield, right? Like the city specified was Bakersfield, and then the other one was like Salem. I think it was Salem, Oregon. That was also very surprising to me.
That's fair enough. Bryce, any big surprises on this list for you?
Coming back to Chicago's a big one. The lack of arenas in Chicago that's really feasible right now, without spending the entire budget that some of these other indoor teams are, just so that way you've got a home to play in. Definitely showcases the idea that this is a league that wants to play in the big places. It's it just amazes me how many markets they've kind of gone to that are burnt out from poor ownership decisions in the past. All of the state of Oregon has been kind of burnt multiple times by bad ownership. They went to, but they get just close enough. It's Everett, Washington. It's not Spokane. It's Salem. It's not Portland. It's Tallahassee. It's not any of the other random places in Florida that have better arenas besides the state capital of the Sunshine State. And they put them there and they roll. And in terms of markets, I do think that it's something that's possible in the future. I did think that Cincinnati as a planned Ohio location was good, given the problems with arenas in Cleveland and the mythical Columbus Wild Dogs of the IFL. At least they made an attempt to try to spread things out, but I don't think that's really the story going into the whole AFL scenario right now.
I would agree. And there's going to be some definite discussion about that here in a second. Albany, any surprises for you? Any big snubs for you? Possibly Albany?
No, I was not expecting Albany to be in the AFL because, first off, even if Antonio Brown wanted to be in the AFL, he still wouldn't anyway because he'd probably back away from him. But also but I also don't think they did because I think the arena already had a couple more tenants that were in that. Well, not other tenants, but other ownership groups that could have been in from two of the other leagues, and they said no to them. I don't know if they're going to go back because they've been saying they might go back to the AFL, but I don't know at this point. But I think also the other two surprises for me were the NAL teams, Orlando and then West Texas, because I didn't really expect them coming into this because, the NAL already has lost two teams in Albany and then Fayetteville, but I wasn't expecting that all like 4 of the 7. I guess 4 of the 7, and maybe, yeah, I'm gonna go with that. But 4 of the 7 teams are out after like a year. It's just kind of weird and surprising, and that could lead to some speculation among like fans, like, oh, is this league folding or not? But I don't think it is, and I think there's going to be a lot more that we'll talk about it later. But I think that really that, excuse me, I think that, yeah, no, I'm just going to end it there. That's my two like big surprises from it.
Fair enough. Ralph, any big surprises for you?
Oh, yeah, I'm not even sure where exactly to begin. I just want to say right out the gate, I am not an enemy of the AFL. I'm viewing this from the outside with a perspective of an advisor to a friend, somebody who's really busy and doing all the other things they do that makes the money for them to possibly play in this thing, or just a buddy who's a fan and wants to know if they should invest emotionally in this league and in the team. And they come to me and they trust me to tell them straight. And I have reservations about this. Just reservations. A little more into background. I retired in the Army as a lieutenant colonel. I've done operations. I understand the intelligence prep. My degrees are in business. I know what a business plan looks like. I know what finances mean. I, I'm no expert. I really am not in this particular thing. But in other things that I do know a bit more about, yeah, I got a really bad feeling about this.
I would say that's pretty fair. There are some things coming out, or some bits of information that make you kind of question things. But we'll definitely get more into that. Krish, any surprises for you on this list? And I know you had some theories the other day about some teams that could possibly be joining from not the NAL but other leagues. Any one of those that you want to speak on?
Well, first off, how are the West Texas Warbirds joining the AFL? Like, I'm not trying to, I respect what they do, but Zach, I know for a fact Zach doesn't have all that money. I know that. Unless he won Powerball overnight. I know, I'm just saying, like, he doesn't have the money. They can hardly run their team right now. I mean, they like sell out probably a quarter of the arena. So, I'm just really surprised that they're in the AFL. Orlando doesn't surprise me. I think John is on his last resort at this point. Two owners have already left that ownership group because they were saying on Inside the Walls, they kind of like previewed it a little bit about how they didn't like confirm anything obviously, but how they might like start their own team. Those two owners that left, which like I wouldn't be surprised if they did because I mean the NAL at this point is like I I worry about the future of the NIL. We'll get into that, but I just like Boise, Idaho. Like we said, it's a weird, obscure location. I'm surprised Jacksonville didn't join. How far is Tallahassee from Jacksonville? Is it
I mean,
About an
I think
hour.
it's a couple hours.
an
So
hour?
there you go.
So, but it just
Hour by Florida driving standards.
yeah. But it's just I I'm really happy for you, by the way, Colorado. If that comes to fruition, that's gonna be huge. But I think overall, I've never seen a league just announce the cities without ownership, without team names. They just come out with the cities, and it's like really hard for me to look at that list and say we're gonna have all these new teams come out of nowhere with full rosters, coaches, owners, arenas, and how is that like even possible? You know, it's shocking to me that Orlando and West Texas already came out and like committed to the AFL, which I'm not saying like they shouldn't have, should have, but if I was the owner, I would have waited till after the season. Cause you burn bridges, easily in the NAL. Do you know how mad the NAL like league office must be? Like I had the media director on earlier. Like he didn't even want to talk about those two teams. He was trying to steer away from them because it's like almost like they betrayed the NAL by leaving. Which the AFL is the bigger opportunity, but I do looking at the AFL staff page. I feel like they have legit. They do have legit backing. I mean, the people running the league seem like people who have experience, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be successful. And so I'm not. I'm really excited. Obviously, I hope it comes back. I hope it's on ESPN, but I'm not. I'm not sold 100%. And then for the teams that I was surprised or like I thought that could jump from other leagues, obviously the two would be Jacksonville and Arizona, but they already came out and said they tried to get Jacksonville. But then an article came out the other day and said that they're trying to add 6 to 8 more teams, which is crazy. Like, how are you going to have a first year 2014 league? That sounds like that's not even possible. They tried that before where they maxed out on teams. What, at one point they were at like 32, 33, something like that. And then they went all the way down to like 6 and then none. So the AFL has history. This is not the first time. They tried to do this in like 2019. At the end, they tried to come back. They couldn't come back. So, and the last thing on this is they messed up the list when they put it out. They wrote San Antonio when it was St. Louis, right? Like, and someone called them out on Facebook, and all of a sudden, like the list changed. So I mean, that's a huge difference, right? San Antonio and St. Louis, like, how can you mess that up on a press release? That's crazy. That's the first, for me, that's the first red flag, honestly. So
Well, let's go ahead and get into that. It seems like there's quite a few red flags, or at least cautionary points that are kind of popping up from the league. Bryce, I know you've got a lot to say about this, so let's go to you first.
Yeah, so let's talk about red flags. I mean, this is looking like a cross country course out here right now because they're all red and yellow flags all over the place. I won't say scam, I will say sham in terms of the AFL moving forward, because what they did is they did the cardinal sin of this sport. They thought that if they just threw out the AFL name, the Arena Football League name, that it would be enough to build it and they would come. And that's not the case, because every person that was ever attached to the AFL in the past said no. No from Arizona, no from Jacksonville, not a single market from the last AFL iteration with Baltimore and Washington and Philly. No Columbus Lions, no Omaha, no Green Bay. Those three are three of the oldest arena and indoor football league teams that are still in existence, not even named or touched with this entire announcement process. And so if all of this goes down the way that they are, you would think that there would be something that would come along with it. But now local media reports are saying that there's not even knowledge of these groups interacting. There's no lease agreements. There's no copyrights. There's barely organization aspects inside the league offices that are being out and available to the public to be seen. And so I get that they're trying to bring this back. It's a cool thing, all that jazz. But when you've got only 4 out of your 16 teams, the 2 teams leaving the NAL, St. Louis, which is connected to an arena, and St. Paul, which is attached to an ownership group but cannot find an arena, then I just don't see this working. I don't see a connection in any way.
I want to pile on there. Bryce, you're a journalist, and you trade in facts and credibility. Army, I look at indications for things that are known. What are the indicators? Okay, so they launched saying 16 locations. In the 48 hours after the launch, we heard from and saw news releases, press releases, responses from Salem, Tallahassee, Lake Charles, Bakersfield, Austin, and Everett. Right out of the gate, 6 of the 16 teams said, huh? And 2 cities, Cincinnati and Boise, said, no thanks. Minnesota was talked about, was alluded to as an ownership group, but who? Philadelphia. Yeah, they drop out the nostalgia name of Jaworski being involved, but Jaworski's social media has gone very, very quiet. Last mention of the AFL was in 2019. So, yeah, great. They announced the family arena in St. Louis, but there's no additional confirmation on their social media or anything else. And league confirmation, okay, Denver, Chicago, Nashville. There was a league announcement, but no reply. Right now, the AFL has 2 teams. 2 teams from that have a venue to play and have a known ownership group. So what is this? I will go say that I think with a high degree of certainty that this isn't going to happen, isn't going to be able to go head-to-head with the XFL, and isn't going to last a year if they even play a game. Because they published the name of 16 places, and I've told you how many. We already have reports of This isn't viable. This isn't happening. Yeah, the place they wanted to play in Austin is scheduled for demolition or some crazy thing like that. And when you go to all these cities and say, we've never heard of you, we look forward to talking to you, that already puts the negotiators for the AFL on the back foot, because the AFL used their names to build credibility, build nostalgia, build interest. They traded on the names of those other people, and so the cities are going to say, well, you kind of owe us here, and it puts them in a bad mood. So that's pretty much, I just look at all these indications and I'm saying it's not what it says it is. I'm not sure what it is, but it is not the AFL 1 or 2. In 2010, when the AFL launched, they had 16 teams. All the teams had logos. We knew the arenas. They had a TV partnership with NFL Network in place and major sponsors before they made their announcement. That's what was in place. Now, they haven't announced, they've announced, and none of these things seem to be in place. So, yes, we all love the AFL. We love what it represented. We all love that nostalgia, the good old days. Well, I'm not sure this is going to bring us back to the good old days, because the products that we have right now have learned from the collapse of the AFL. They are extremely cautious. They are about growth and sustainment. Now, they could do better at it, honestly, because, I mean, NAL, dude, you lost 3 teams this year, 1 before you even played. That's not the greatest thing, but we're there. We're trying to grow, and we haven't blown up yet because we're not being aggressive. We're not spending super money. We're not doing. We've learned. The league, the industry has learned from the mistakes of AFL and AFL 2. And this thing that looks like AFL 3 has not learned any of those mistakes. So, I don't know. I would not advise my friend to pay the money, to be prepared to lose the $1.5 million to start up a team, to pay the franchise fee of whatever it is, because I'm not sure what this league is actually going to be able to be. It's got 2 teams, but those 2 teams, yeah. It maybe they're announcing as a leverage to get a better deal out of the NAL. Heck, I don't know. But anyhow, I'm just kind of going to peter out from there because I don't know anymore. So that's when I got to stop talking, right, Bryce?
I mean, I have more. I was just letting other people talk.
Oh, bring it! Bring even more. I'm looking forward to this. We got a landslide, a deluge.
Well, let's. I'll see if anybody else wants to jump in and bring up some other points. So,
definitely, Big Boy. Do you have any points on this?
Man. Well, y'all already got all the good points out of it, so yeah. So we kind of gotten into it. We know at least what we've learned, from this new edition of the AFL, this AFL 3.0. I don't know how long it could last. It might not even play. The viability, definitely something we have to take into consideration. I don't know anything about no franchise fees. I don't know if it could be like 1.5 million or whatever, as far as like the franchise fees go. I don't know.
Well, that number came from a conversation between a very senior coach known, if I mention the name, and the owner of a franchise fairly close to me, where the owner called up the coach and said, I'll take any advice you have to give. And the advice was, be prepared to lose $1.5 million your first year. Not necessarily franchise fees of that, just you've got to buy offices, you've got to buy space, you've got to buy all these fixtures, you've got to establish a payroll, and you're not going to be efficient your first year. You're going to learn. And that learn is pain, and pain is going to mean you're going to bleed cash. And the owner said, but I don't have 1.5 million to lose. And the coach said, well, then maybe you shouldn't buy the team. The owner bought the team, and the owner didn't make it a year. Because people want to own a football team. How cool would that be? How cool would it be to own your very own football team? And then hobnob, and I mean, it's the big toy, and you're right there. But it's a business, and it's a business decision. And there's a lot of regret in business. And I think that's what we're looking at, is a big pile of regret. But it wasn't specific to anything. That's just from a story.
No, that's completely fair. I'd have to go back and check my notes, but I want to say the buy-in fee itself is like 500,000 overall. It was like a 2 million cost for the initial year, if I'm not mistaken. But that's just all rough estimates. Albany defense kid, you got anything to add to all these points?
I guess I wouldn't say like the part I'm talking about is football related, but when I heard that they were trying to get into the metaverse, I'm like, oh no, that's bad. No, because previous stuff that isn't even sports related, when they get into the metaverse, they have like a low I don't know, fan base towards them. Like I think Metatron, they didn't really do so well, but I don't know. But besides the point, I mean, when they said that and they said you can watch the 2 games at once with a friend who's across like the country or in a different country or whatever. No, I just want to watch one game. Like it's hard enough for me already to watch like 3 on the opening week of this year's NAL. So I mean, I don't really know if that's gonna work out for them, but I mean it's cool and hip, and that's one of the cool and hip things that I'm not really a big fan of, just because the metaverse and I think I'm gonna have to pull up the article from when the AFL was partnering up with the metaverse thing. I gotta find it real quick, but they said, hold on, it'll be a second.
You're good. I also was kind of interested to see that move. I think it's a good way to bring in funds, but at the same time, it seems like a lot. Like it seems like you're putting a lot on your plate all at once. And again, I'm not really familiar with the behind the scenes as far as who they all have employed at this point, who all is working behind the scenes to make this all work. So I'm not really sure how big of a staff they've got all working on all of this stuff, but it seems like a lot to bite off right at the beginning of their life. But go ahead.
So I pulled it up. So the CEO of the thing that the AFL is using for the metaverse thing says, we are excited to partner with the AFL because their business model is perfectly designed to take advantage of the third dimension for security tokens, what we call consumer ownership. Fans want more. They want to be investors as well as consumers. Proof of ownership via a Synced wallet in the metaverse in real life will offer new ways to reward your fan base and improve retention, which sucks because I feel like a lot of the fans, they just know the game as a fan standpoint, and they don't know as like an ownership thing. And I feel like that's going to end up bad for them in more ways than one. And if it's kind of like an NFT buying into ownership thing, it's doomed to fail, in my opinion.
That's fair. Where was that article from?
The AFL retweeted it, and it's from press. I don't know where it's from, but it's like, I don't know if I can share it in here or not, but I'll see.
If you could just grab where it's from so we can credit them, that would be great.
Yeah, there we go. I think that's it.
Gotcha. Krish, what are your thoughts to add to this? And it's prnewswire.com for the record.
Well, first off, what professional league on Twitter likes every single post? You go to the AFL, you go to their likes, they like every single post. Saying like they'll like anything and everything that comes across their timeline. Like, oh, Orlando's gonna leave the NAL, the NAL is gonna fold. I saw them like a post that said that. I'm like, what league does that? Now, granted, like the NAL, the commissioner, he hides behind a Twitter account, but that's a whole different thing, right? Like, at least when he posts something, he deletes it after like a week. But like this AFL, like they like everything and anything, like and so that's a red flag for me personally, because whoever's running the Twitter account, I get engaging with fans, but you have to like be professional. You know what I mean? If you're trying to be like the top tier league, you can't go around liking everything. And I'm just I'm so like we've been talking about. I'm really like skeptical. I'm not sure if this is gonna last. I and players are excited. I spoke to a San Antonio Gunslingers receiver, Kendrick Gaines, early in the week, and it was actually 20 minutes before the news dropped, and he was really really excited. Like he was hyped. He was like, "Man, I can't wait for the AFL to come back." And you'll hear it when the interview drops, but like I feel for him, like he's excited. He was excited about the pay. The pay is reportedly $2,800 a game, which is crazy. We're going from $250 a game. Mind you, there's probably, some cash under the table, which is fine. I think $250 a game, we talked about before, is not okay for any business to pay that. But $2,800 a game is legit something where I can say, okay, I can work, play in the AFL for 10 games, maybe take a month or two off and then get a job, right? Because then you can get to where you need to get to with that. But I'm just, I really hope this, I really want to see this succeed, by the way. Like, I really am high on this. And as much as I want to see my IFL dominate and go to the top, because I know obviously the IFL right now is the number one league. There's no debate on that. But I think overall, the AFL is trying to jump too high for the first year. You gotta take to build a league. You gotta start from the bottom, and you gotta build up. Start with like 8 teams, and then go to the IFL took a while to get to 14. That's why they only add like 1 or 2 teams a year, and even sometimes they don't add any because they're happy with the teams they have. The organizations are stable. I mean, I know it real quick. I know it out here, right? We have a summer collegiate league up here, and this year the league tried to go to like 12 teams. After the first year, 3 teams folded, and then after that, like another 4 teams folded. So they decided, okay, we're gonna stop on this, and we're gonna only add 1 or 2 teams. Now the league is at 8 teams, and they stay at 8 teams. They haven't added teams for the last 3 years because they're like, we're happy with our 8 teams. We don't want to even like look at adding other teams. Which I think the more teams, it grows the game. I think it's great. I think the more cities, the more more travel. But my question is, where is all this money coming from? We're not in Saudi Arabia. We're in America, so it's just we don't have loads of money to just toss around. I hear $700,000 buy-in fee. There's I don't want to say very few owners. I mean, there's owners that can afford that, but to lose that much money, like I want to own a football team eventually, right? Like I want to own a ring team, but I can tell you right now, like I'm not going to be able to own one until I'm 45, right? To even build up the financial stability. But I mean, I respect young owners. I respect people who go after what they want. Like I know I came after West Texas owner earlier, right, Zach? But Zach is young, right? Zach is probably 27, and I respect that he's young and he's chasing his dream, and his team just got moved up to the AFL. But like he has to be ready for all the expenses that come with that. They're gonna have to upgrade their arena unless the AFL wants to, have that quality arena, which it would be crazy if that's the product they're going for. When I think of AFL, I think of professional, I think of big, I think of colorful, I think of packed stands. I don't think of West Texas. I don't think of that. So they gotta pick their poison.
It's fair enough. It sounded like somebody started to say something and then stopped.
Oh, I was just saying New York streets as the analogy to back what Chris was saying. And the question is, where is the money? We don't know who the major backer is. We saw some kind of financial management group. I, I've been so disinterested. I haven't bothered to look them up and see what their public records are and what they're financed for. But I do know this, that people who can afford a football team did not get there by accident. They got there by making a lot of really good decisions and taking good risks that they evaluated. And right now, I'm seeing a lot of risks, and I'm not even one of the guys that are getting the information. And if I'm seeing these risks, they're seeing these risks. And what it comes down to is the league is banking on that ego will override common sense and good business practice. And as much as it does, that's going to be the deal. Why did Orlando leave? Was it just a big FU to losing this year? And they've got the Orlando All-Stars roster. They've got a lot of great players there, and they're not getting the results they want. So, I'll take my ball and go home. And this was the only place to jump to out of the frying pan. I'm not sure what the motivation was with West Texas, and I was kind of surprised. But what makes me really, really mad, guys, is the damage that this is doing to other leagues, especially mine. We were talking, hey, this week we're going to announce Tuesday some changes and what we're going to look like next year, and it's going to be glorious. And this blew it away. People who we were talking to said, okay, we need to put a pause on this until we can see the dust settle from this building explosion that was the AFL. This hurt other people besides the credibility of the AFL. And that's what makes me mad. They pulled the pin on the grenade, threw it into the room, closed the door, and walked away, and did not care what happened to the people inside that room. And that makes me mad.
That's a pretty fair analogy, quite honestly, because I mean, honestly, obviously they have their own interests at heart when they do this announcement. But yeah, there definitely was some fallout already, and that was just the immediate reaction. We don't know what else is to come from this announcement, and there I'm sure will be waves sent regardless of how this league goes down or if it never plays at all. I mean, you're going to see West Texas and Orlando left in the cold and trying to find another league to jump back into if it never works and stuff like that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all pans out. One thing I wanted to note, Ralph ran down a bunch of cities that have had announcements that they were not aware of the team. Nothing has come out from Colorado. I've reached out to 3 different arenas that I believe would be viable for them. Nothing from the arenas back. I've reached out to the media director from the Arena Football League asking where they're targeting. Nothing back from the league. So it's very questionable the fact that little to no information is coming out about where these teams are going to play. And you figure, I mean, we haven't heard any concrete announcements for when the league will actually kick off or what their season will look like in terms of the span of the year. At least I haven't. As has anybody else?
Yeah, I think I've heard. I mean, I heard on the podcast they said they want to kick off, and so the kickoff date for the AFL is April 27th, and which is a crazy day. It's like the NAL a couple years ago. They used to kick off in like the end of April, so April 27th is the kickoff date. They're gonna play 10 weeks, so I think that brings you to middle of June, but I could be wrong, and then championship and playoffs.
Oh,
Gotcha.
oh,
So
okay. I thought it was June. I thought they were.
Yeah,
I thought it was.
the timer.
It
They
was
have a timer on their website. It says like there's a countdown, and so I just like clicked on like the day, and it said like April, which is weird to me. But one point that I did want to say about the New York streets, right? Like, New York streets are one of the only away games I've been to, and I went up to New York 3 years ago, 2019. And I remember watching the stream on YouTube, and I'm like, this arena looks small, but the way they were talking about it was like, this is like gold. It's so nice to go up to New York. So I'm like, okay. So I went up to New York. I walked into that arena. I was horrified. I'm like, there's no way this is like a pro team arena. And you walk in, and it's like my high school gymnasium. That's what it was. It,
37 yards.
Yes. I mean, honestly, I walked on the field. There's no way that was 50 yards. It's like, I know I come at Duke City's field a lot, but Duke City's field is only like a couple yards short. But the whole thing is that their suite or like their party area was above the upright. So you had the upright, and like it was like right above. It was so weird. So there's a bunch of people crowded on this like party deck area, and the balls flying through. A couple people got hit with balls because there was no netting. It was like, I'm like, what is this? Like, this is not professional at all. And then so the speakers at the game weren't working. So they played the same song the entire game. I'm not kidding you. The entire game they would play the same exact.
Hip hop track, urban style.
Yeah,
generic 110.
So it was awful, and I'm like, so that was concerning me when I see the AFL teams and cities come out and say like we haven't heard of it. That's the quality they're going for, because I mean that would be really a shame.
And
That's my concern.
And we all know the story about the dasher boards, the walls are undefeated. Well, I believe in the game that you saw, Krish, you saw the dasher boards be defeated because the dasher boards they had there was just a piece of plastic. It wasn't a hockey board, and the player blew through it like it was a piece of plastic with a bit of foam on the outside, and they had to stop the game. I mean, it was ludicrous. So the one time the boards lost was on the streets. Yeah. And this is the thing. What if the only game some casual person flipping through YouTube said, "Oh wow, there's a New York team. I lived in New York at one point or another. Let me check it out," and that was the game they saw? Oh man, this is this is laughable. This is absolutely, yes, and Inside the Walls is correct. The official NAL record is a 56-yard field goal because it was kicked on a field that wasn't even 50 yards. It was great to go there because, man, you're going to pad your numbers offensively.
They had a net, so their net was, the top. If you hit the top of the net, then you have to go through. You just have to hit the top of the net, and it was not even near like the upright. It was outside the upright, and it was considered good. It was.
The officials had to judge. Well, would that have gone through the uprights? Would it not? And what the hell? It was awful. Could not go through the uprights. It was impossible to on one end of the end zone.
It was. And that's what concerns me. The NAL has a history of just adding a bunch of teams to try to get to that number, and it's like they talk about it like, oh, we're gonna take expansion slowly this year. We're gonna take, they keep saying that. They said that last year. They're like, oh, we're gonna take expansion slowly. They had the commissioner on their show, and I mess with the commissioner, like I said before, but I'm gonna come at him again. The whole thing is, he was like, oh, we learned from our past mistakes. We're gonna take them slowly, and then you had Fayetteville, right? And like we talked about this before, Fayetteville is the same market that the Cape Fear Heroes played in, right? Like they had red flags for that market. So the guy didn't have the money. I was talking to Kendrick Andrews. He said on the podcast that like they still haven't gotten paid, which is like a huge issue. And then they had Albany with, as soon as they let go of Tom and Oz in Albany, they should have known immediately that there was a problem. They really should have. Honestly, like, no offense to Damon Ware, but Damon Ware is like a Walmart wannabe Tom and Oz. He wants to be Tom and Oz. He's never gonna be Tom and Oz. So I'm just saying, like, it's a fact, right? And we can get into that later. But so that's what I when I saw that, I'm like, how do you let go of, someone like Kamenath, and so, and then they let go of, they had like coaches in and out. They had, Pete Porcelli in there. And like, it just, when that whole team kept imploding, I knew there was going to be a problem. So I'm just, I really, really, really pray to God that this AFL is legit and it stays around and it had legit TV partners. I don't want to see. I could see the AFL very well come back and be on like Fubu TV or Tubi TV or something like that. If they're talking about the metaverse is like it. I just I don't know. The metaverse. We read articles about the metaverse. We've all seen stuff on YouTube about what people have to, the terror people have to experience in the metaverse. The metaverse is not a friendly place at all. I don't recommend. I mean, I've had people that I know go in the metaverse, and I mean, they've been kidnapped, everything. So it's just it's not a friendly experience. So for the AFL to be partnering up with that, like.
Okay, we're gonna rein this back in. We're getting way off on a tangent here. Bryce had some more information that he wanted to add to the discussion, so let's go ahead and go back to Bryce.
All right, so one interesting aspect of this that really it was brought up by somebody else in a different conversation, but the comments allegedly made by Jaws. He's not on the record of actually talking to anybody. This is just reports of a conversation that was held between the commissioner and Jaworski. I don't know how that's credible. I don't understand why anybody would take credence with that, because that is literally just hearsay. And for a lawyer who's represented multiple Fortune 500 companies and has been involved in litigation with name, image, and likeness for NCAA students or student athletes, how is that credible? It's very frustrating to me because you start to see some of the mistakes that pop up over and over again, and having somebody who's that big of a lawyer and that involved with legal issues, committing to hearsay as a marketing ploy is incredibly alarming. And if that's the approach that they're going to take, and there's no way to back it up, I don't know how you're supposed to trust anything that they're saying at that point. Because if you're going to rely on hearsay, you're going to rely on other people's testimony and recollection of those issues. I don't see this coming along. And now that they've done it with they're not just doing it with markets, they're doing it with people. And the NAL, one of the multiple reasons why the NAL is failing this year is because it's relying on nostalgia, bringing back the Nets, bringing back the Iron Man, things that players, insurance companies, bottom lines for pocketbooks don't necessarily want to see back as part of the sport. And now you're pulling this with actual people. That might be the biggest red flag out of all of this. Because what standard are we at if your commissioner, who's a lawyer, is doing that, and now you're dealing and now you're here? It's mind-boggling to me, and I'm really disappointed with this, because this is the way that we've seen in multiple other markets with regular teams before too, and all of those teams have failed as well.
That's a great point. I wanted to add some points that Jim Murnay of Inside the Walls podcast was giving me. He said a conversation was a phone call between Hutton and the newspaper. Hutton was never even in Philadelphia. So it's crazy to hear that this is all based on speculation and hearsay, like you said, and none of it is based in fact. And if that's part of what your structure is supposed to be, like, how are you supposed to trust anything else that comes out from this league and what they're saying? I mean, it just is nearly unbelievable. It's almost like half of what Chris says, especially the Walmart version Damon Ware. Like, what? Damon Ware is an amazing coach, and Tom Manas would tell you the same thing. He would actually tell you that it was a big reason that they were so successful, that they split the duties. He ran the defense, Damon Ware ran the offense. They were very much basically co-head coaches. So I understand you
I
have your opinions, but that's one opinion that is not based in fact, buddy.
I mean, look at Orlando's offense, man. If you can't start, if the offensive at the end of the day, if the offensive coordinator decision who starts the head, quarterback. For me, that's what I look at it as, right? And so they continue to go with Southwick, and they can't get offense going. I mean, look at the past 2 games, right? And like I said, I should have started with this, right? Like what Damon Ware did in Albany, first couple games was cool, right? Like I'm not saying like he's a bad coach. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that he's just not at that level yet. You know what I mean? And so I'm not at that level yet either. I mean, I'll be at that level and better, but I just think that it it you it's with facts, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like if you look at the stats don't lie. So
You got to remember, this is Damon Ware's first year as a head coach at this level. And he's always had a partner there who he trusted implicitly and trusted him implicitly to check each other's decisions. Now there's no one to turn to. Your first guest coach is what is going to happen. And until he develops another relationship, and that didn't happen overnight with Manas and Ware, that's not going to be there. He's seeking who can he partner with, who can he knock things off of quickly and come up with. When that comes, yeah, I expect Ware will be a top tier coach in this league, because who did he study under? So the student eventually exceeds the master, perhaps, but that is the path it's on. We're just in the early days. If anyone thought that Damon Ware was mini Manas, you were asking more of the man than we reasonably should have expected.
yeah, no, I mean I think, but I just wish that him and Herpy Walls would work, work more and more together. You know what I mean? And I'm not gonna obviously I don't know and like everything I say, right? Like with that whole thing, like I don't have any sources that tell me this or anything, but there's so much friction there. Like with all these all stars, like we said earlier, like how do you have those level of players and you can't win games? And I'm not gonna, name the players, but I see a lot of Facebook and Instagram posts from certain players on the team. They're out partying every other night, and so it shows like there needs to be more discipline and accountability. And for them, it's a 4-5 team league, so for the teams already, like the playoffs have been set for weeks now, right? So they feel like comfortable. They're like, we can't go higher than the 4 seed, so why? And that really stinks. But for me, like I felt like they should have kept the quarterback they had down there, Joseph Pass. I thought he was really he was young, but they could have developed him into something real special. He was up in Albany with Damon Ware, and so it's just like little things like that kind of get me.
That's fair. I mean, the only point I was trying to make is that Damon Ware is a great coach. I think that he's a future head coach. I think that he will eventually be a very good future head coach at that. Um, to credit what you did say, Tom Manas is an amazing coach, one of the best in any league, and any league would be happy to have him. It does sound like he's trying to end up in the AFL, so I really hope for his sake, after everything he's been through over the past year, that the AFL is as legit as they say, and that they can give him a good home to land in, because if nothing else, he deserves it.
And I feel like if he, I mean, I don't want to speculate, but I feel like if he's buying the AFL, there has to be some validity, because he seems like someone that, if he sees something not right, he'll call it out. I'm not saying that means the AFL is completely true, but they must have told him something on the side, it's going to be this and this.
I I feel like he's got some information that makes him feel that like it's going to be legit. I would say that he's a very intelligent person, and I would be willing to bet that he is not going into that blindly. So, I mean, I don't know what information he has. He definitely has not shared anything with me. To be fair, I haven't asked though. So, everything that he voiced on here a couple weeks ago, he was not he did not hold back. He spoke with a lot of candor. So I think if anybody wants to hear his thoughts on the Arena Football League, go back and watch the 2.5 hour episode we had with him. Literally 2.5 hours of Tom Manas just basically telling you everything that you wanted to hear about arena football. So it was a lot of fun. But let's go to some of the guys that have been a little bit quiet. Let's go to Albany defense kid. Anything that you want to touch on? I'm sure you want to say some stuff about the comments about the Albany coaching staff.
Oh, Walmart Tom and Us is Damon Ware. Okay. Well, I mean, we've gone for a lot of ups and downs. Gonna go right on this. Like saying that, he coached 3 good games, 3 close games, and even though I think around like the Carolina game, they had like a little bit less passion that they did the previous 2 weeks, and especially while under Antonio. They still had 2 close games, 2 close losses against San Antonio and even Carolina. Yeah, and then they had that big win when Orlando wasn't good. God, I wish that was still true. But I mean, the Empire and then seeing that, and then all the players leave to go on to different teams. And then just sucked. I mean, Antonio Brown was definitely not a good owner, and I had a little bit of, I basically told him on Twitter, uh, hey, stop it. This is bad. I may boycott this. Oh no, he's trying to run away? Let's call him some words that aren't very nice. And he did, then deleted. And somehow no one noticed that, except for me and a lot of other people, including he thought that I was a former intern. Not true. I'm a different person, not an intern. I'm also too young to be an intern because I'm like, I think at the time, I would have been a year before I could have been an intern for the team. And honestly, I would have been an intern for the team. I don't care. If I don't know what I would do, but if I had to do something, I would probably do something. But really, I think that'll end that little thing there about like Albany, because I don't really know. There's something else. Like people want to talk about arena football wise, like I don't know. But so I'm just gonna end my Albany rant there.
You're fine. I was curious. Do you see Albany coming back to any league, not necessarily the AFL?
I was feeling hopeful when they said, "Oh, we're gonna have arena football in 2024." And if I had to pick, and I think I'd say the 3 teams that could have, or ownerships that could have happened, was either Corda, Tridico, and then you know who. And obviously, you know who is no longer pretty much talking about this. You would figure that out because he may or may not have bought a champagne case worth more than the amount of money that could have saved the team. So we're not going to talk about that. That's real, by the way. I'll probably have to link that too. But with Tridico, he's gone through places like Columbus and basically, apparently, made that team move out of the NAL, which I don't know if it was Tridico or not, but I think that was him. I don't know. I'll have to recheck that. That may be wrong. But Corda, although maybe according to my grandpa, Papa Defense, might be a little bit, I'll say it's sketchy. And I personally like Corda as an owner. I think he's still the best owner available to get a team. And even if it's with the IFL, he's local, and I feel like that even with what AB said before he left the team earlier on, I think he's still ready to get a team next year. But the arena saying, "Oh, it's workers' comp, workers' comp." That's the big thing that, like, you've already gone through it with Corda. Like, what? I don't really know the thing about workers' comp, but I know that's a big thing in New York. It's like 1.5 million as well. That's what they had to pay. Like, oh, that's a lot too. But you need someone who's got money enough where he can run a team, and that's why he's saying we won't have a team in 24. Do I think we'll have it? I mean, it would be cool too, but I think it might be like a good idea to let the dust settle in Albany until like maybe 2025, and then we'll see where we'll go here.
I gotta say something about Albany, the market. Albany area, 100,000 is your population. Okay. How the freak are you getting 3% of your entire population into a game week after week after week? The Albany area loves arena football. They love the Albany Empire. I mean, for crying out loud, my city, 2.1 million. If I had 3%, there isn't a stadium in our town that could hold that people. So the level of commitment there is much, much higher. I'm not sure anyone else can boast those percentages. Maybe Orlando, maybe Jacksonville. But from an outside investor potential, from somebody coming in who's willing to, there's something in Albany that doesn't exist. I don't think any other league can boast that number of people who are willing to buy tickets week after week after week than Albany. So if anyone's going to come back, yeah, they'll figure out the details. Somebody will get some kind of deal with the legislature there in Albany saying, hey, we've got this thing. The people want it. It's very popular. Would you get your boot off my neck, please, so I can run a team? I see Albany as a very positive. There's a lot of upside there. And I
100%.
hope it happens.
100%.
I mean, I feel like that. I think the Albany area, because this happened really with like the Conquest too, and so like the Firebirds averaged about 10,000 fans, like I think throughout their entire history. The Conquest averaged like 4,000 in the AF2, and they had some good seasons, like when they won like 10 games. But that was early on, and then they brought back the Firebirds. Didn't really help them as much. But when the Empire came back, they went back to 10,000 people in a game. Well, I mean in the AFL. And then when they came back in the NAL, maybe partially due to COVID and also maybe due to the new league with different rules, they had less fans. And I think that they're attracted to the AFL name because that's what was good in the first place. That's what happened with the with the 2018-2019 Empire. And also the 2018 Empire should have been champions. Sorry, Arvell Nelson, you shouldn't have won a title. Anyways, but
Exactly. He got so far off on a tangent, he forgot what he was saying. That's hilarious.
But I mean, it's just kind of unlike. I don't even know where I was after that because it's just like, I mean, I don't know. I lost all my train of thought there.
No worries. Perfect time to introduce our normal co-host, Dukan from Arena Football Statement. Dukan, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. How are you doing today?
Hey guys, good to see you all doing good. Arena football's boring, right? There hasn't been any major announcements this week that I know of.
Yeah,
right?
None at all.
Yep.
None at all. Okay. Yeah. Good time to be out of it for a little while.
No doubt. No doubt. So with that in mind, what were your thoughts on the NAL team leaving? NAL teams leaving for the AFL?
Big mistake. That's
Wow.
my thought.
Short and sweet. I like it. Short and sweet. I love it. That's definitely kind of the way I'm leaning at this point. I don't know what to think. I really want to hope that the AFL comes back because I want an arena football team. I want to go get season tickets the second they announce it, but we'll see if it actually goes through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's pretty groundbreaking, the announcements and everything, but they're awfully preemptive. I think you guys have done your own research on that. And yeah, I do think the AFL will have a season. I don't think they'll get anywhere near 16 teams. And I think that if they don't straighten their act out, it's actually going to hurt the AFL name and brand. And people will start to lose faith in it.
I could definitely see that. If you had to compare it to a current league that exists, what level do you see it playing out at?
Oh man, good question. Uh, well, to be honest with you, I would say it's a little less than where the CIF's at right now. And the reason I say that is because you got these guys coming in. They do have a lot of ambition, high lofty goals, which is really cool. Their passion is unparalleled. But to be announcing all these things that are going to happen when you are not familiar with today's market, when you're not familiar with basically the amount of travel expenses and everything that happens. It seems like these guys are kind of caught back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it was a different market back then. Yeah, even the workers' compensation and insurance laws, everything was different. It was probably a little bit easier back then, and they struggled back then. And so to be making these big lofty announcements this early on, I think just shows a lack of experience, especially when you have a league like the IFL that's been around for a while, and they're still at 14 teams. And they've gone through all of the ups and downs, and they've become more familiar with today's market. It's just pretty tough to be announcing 16 teams right now.
100%. And I said this in our group chat a couple days ago, and I thought it was kind of an apt comparison, but it's kind of like the XFL and the USFL. You have the XFL, that's this big flash in the pan. They're trying to make the huge splash signings. They're trying to be way in your face with all the content, etc. Even in the off season, and they're spending a lot of money up front. The USFL is taking a little bit more measured approach. A little bit less money's going out right away. So they're, in my mind, a little bit closer to the IFL model, where the IFL isn't necessarily, throwing money at the league left and right, but they're still growing. They're still finding a way to continue to succeed. So it's definitely an interesting approach on both leagues. Big Boy, we've kind of been avoiding you for a little bit. So what are your takes on everything that was just brought up? I know there's a lot there to unpack.
Yeah.
What do you think about the way that the AFL is approaching everything so far?
Man, y'all kind of cooked. I'm just gonna be rude, y'all. Y'all kind of cooked, but the AFL right now, as it stands, again, a lot of ambition, a lot of, hopes and dreams, kind of up in the air. I definitely don't see 16 teams. I'd see maybe I'd say 8 at best. Cut that number in half. That's the number I think we'll see in 2024. As far as Albany goes, yeah, the workers' comp thing, yeah, I didn't know about that till a couple of days ago. That sort of issue may keep, may keep Albany out of public eye for 2024. Definitely think, 2025, if things aren't resolved, with the whole workers' comp situation, definitely 2025 we'll be seeing Albany somewhere, maybe an IFL team. If the NAL is still around, we'll see them in the NAL, maybe even the AFL. I don't know. What else was I going to say? I think I lost my train of thought.
No worries. It seems to be happening to everybody. I did the same thing earlier. With that in mind,
I've just been kind of blindsided, by pretty much everything, with the whole AFL announcement. It just kind of blindsided me, came out of nowhere. I remember, again, going back to, I think what Chris said earlier, they were like, or was it Albany defense kids? I don't know. They were liking everybody's tweets, and I was like, I even made a tweet towards the AFL. I was like, what were they cooking? And then they liked it, and I was like, why are they liking this post? So I don't know. I don't know what the minds of the AFL are thinking right now. I don't know. It's all blindsided me when there's so much other stuff to talk about. The AFL kind of took the thunder out of everything else that needs to be talked about. Like we have the IFL playoffs tonight. Yep. We have the NAL still kicking in the high gear, getting closer and closer to the playoffs themselves. Everything's still happening. Everywhere else, it's just the AFL kind of took the thunder out of everything.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of interesting to see the timing of the announcements. Go ahead, Bryce.
So one of the things is that if the AFL is to survive in any incantation whatsoever, they have to kill everybody off. They have to get rid of these other concepts, these other leagues. They need the IFL to go into literal obscurity. They need the NAL to implode even faster than what it is. They need to have the CIF have problems, which it sounds like it has, whether or not that's been made public or official at this point. It seems like there's going to be some very tumultuous times in the CIF this offseason too. So for them to come in and literally deflate all of the extra information, use that branding, use everybody else's good work in the past is only going to strengthen their brand. And they've made some, cheap looking videos. They're trying to have some fan engagement through liking tweets and stuff like that, just to make sure that you're always in the back of your mind thinking the NAL, the IFL, the CIF, and everybody else are all of the imposters that just held the door open until the real AFL brand can come back. And that is the one thing that this AFL group has done exceptionally well. And it's the most dangerous for the sport as a whole.
That's such a good point. That is a great point. Go ahead, Ralph.
As I mentioned earlier, comparing to the 2010 launch, this launch is nowhere as solid as the 2010. You mentioned the video promo that started this. You look into the background, that is basically shareware, not shareware, but open source graphics. Like, hey, I want this picture. You pay a royalty, it's yours. That animation graphic of the fireball, yeah, $20. What? Yeah, $20. The basis of the video by the AFL with all this money is a $20 graphic special effect purchasable online. Is that really the hallmark of a professional organization that has backing? They had nobody with a visual arts studio, the ability to create something more and something different.
They literally could have called Duke on it, come up with better videos. 100%. I feel that in my heart. His videos are amazing. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened there.
Design is my passion.
What they've done, what the AFL has done here is traded on the memories and nostalgia that we all had for the good old days. And they keep promising us the good old days. And it's going to look like this, and it's going to be here, and it's going to be there. And a lot of people want that. They want hope. These aren't the greatest times in the country right now. People want something to look forward to. And they are selling hope, and I think it's cruel. I really, really think it's cruel. And I think there may very well be a reckoning because of it, because of how cruel this actually is.
It's pretty fair to wonder. I mean, a lot of these teams that are still around are around for a reason. These owners know what they're doing. They have been around the game for many years, many teams, a lot of them. So they've kind of learned and cut their teeth in this industry. So that's the big part of this that I think is interesting. If we're coming up with basically 14 expansion teams that may or may not have been previous ownership groups. That's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, you look at a team like the league like the NAL, where they had 8 teams this year, and we talked about it earlier. They lost 3 teams in one season, and literally one of those teams, Columbus, was already pretty established. In fact, the oldest team in the NAL, if I'm not mistaken, one of the founding members of the league. So it's one of those things where it's like, again, it just speaks to a tone deaf ownership group for the AFL that does not realize where indoor football lies at this point. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see arena football be back on TV. I would love to see it grow to what it once was, where they can offer 6-figure contracts and get borderline NFL players, because that's when most of us here all fell in love with the league and the game, because that was when the most exciting play really happened back in the day. It was when we had guys like McLeod Bethel Thompson and, all these different players that were recognizable names that had played in the NFL or, had NFL ties in one way or another, whether it was ownership groups or whatever. But it's just kind of interesting to see how everything's going down so far. But to kind of shift gears a little bit and touch on it, I was curious to get everybody's opinion on what the future of the NAL is. Obviously, we've talked a lot about it. They've lost, basically now 5 teams. They had 8 to begin the season. So what do they do? Where do they go from here? Ralph, let's go to you first.
Expansion in the NAL has been difficult over the past several years, and the market's going to determine whether the NAL survives. It really is about the market. Will there be a consolidation between leagues? Will there be additional expansion? But whatever it is, it needs to be stable, because the NAL brand has not stood for the stability that the commissioner wanted it to be, because we haven't gotten that stability. And all it takes is one location. I have a 2-word fix for the NAL, and that 2-word fix is business plan. Make sure every owner submits a business plan. Just like if you were going to a bank to get a loan, every new ownership group is trading on the goodwill of the NAL. They are taking a withdrawal from the bank of the goodwill and the reputation of the league. And we got to make sure that those teams and those owners can repay that and build it. And you've got to show, hey, we'll guarantee you a certain number of attendance. We will guarantee you that we will, low end our payroll will be. We will guarantee you that we are going to spend, and we know this is effective, spend advertising and promotional dollars within the community. Until before, it's like, yeah, you give us your dues and you're on your own. No, we can't do that anymore. We simply cannot wait for that, because people do not know, as we said, people do not know how to run a professional sports organization. You don't just grow up. That's not a major you can go and get, I don't believe, in college.
Not at all. I mean, like I said, a lot of these owners have kind of been involved with several teams, have been a part of a team folding at one point, kind of learned from their mistakes, and then got to the point where they could set up a more successful standard. So, Albany defense kid, let's go to you next. What are your thoughts on the NAL's future, including Albany as well? I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you see them come back to the NAL eventually?
I mean, if Tradico can get it done, I think Albany will come back. But with his kind of history, and I said earlier, but also I may not be accurate about this, that Tradico had something to do with Columbus last year, and then how that ended, but could be wrong on that. But I think the future of the NAL is good, because I feel, I mean, even with all the teams leaving, they have to get something in order. They have to do something so if it's like, hey, you can sign up here to get a team, which I think was on their website, but they have to have like some sort of like thing. They have to talk with the owners and see if they're actually good, see if they have the amount of like money to start a team and have a team for at least one season. I think that's just the base. I think that's just the baseline there. But I mean, the NAL I think is the best league, in my opinion, because of the pace of play, the high scoring, and just me being a fan of a team that won 2 titles. Totally, yay! But I mean, I don't, I don't really know that. I think the NAL will come back from this stronger. I mean, you see what they're doing. They've been with only like 6 teams in the past couple of years. Like every year since, um, like Albany came in 21, they've had 6 teams, and then we'll count. Then they went up 2, and then they lost 3, but they're still around that 5 to 6 teams mark. So they're stable, and now they're gonna lose more. So that means they're gonna have to try to get more teams in. And I think that if they can make a deal done, I feel like they're gonna get a team from the IFL, which I don't know. Just saying that they're gonna try to get Albany. I don't know. Also, just saying that, and then maybe a new expansion team. They got to get either. I feel like they should get like some people like that. They should get an owner who's like already trying to who's already been in the game and has run the team successful. Tridico maybe or Corda. I don't know who's going to the IFL or not, or who's trying to. Maybe get another owner who's from a different league and then try to get them over. But I don't know if like contracts are in place for like their respective leagues or arenas. I don't know that the arenas have to do something to do with it, but and then they got to find a new like expansion team that they can trust and they can have a team for a season. I feel like having that, they can get right back into things and get back up to that 16 mark that they've been consistently getting for the past couple of years.
Absolutely. Bryce, what are your thoughts on the future of the NAL?
There is none. Ultimately, let's be completely honest. We all know that the Cobras, which have been completely not brought up today, are in significant financial issues. They've got enough to go through the end of the year, but as long as Rob Storm is still dealing with all of his litigation issues, then the Cobras are suspect as well. So the Cobras are not a guaranteed for next year. It doesn't sound like Horta and Tridico are working together in Albany anyway, which means that that's going to be conflicting ownership groups if that market comes back for 24, which basically just leaves San Antonio and Jacksonville. Well, guess what? One of those teams has a long-standing history and one of them doesn't. And no offense to San Antonio in this way, because I know that they're trying. They've got a lot of positives that are going on right there. But Jacksonville is the only one that looks like they've got the ability to stand something like this. And if that's the case, then what's Jacksonville going to do? Because it doesn't sound like Columbus is going to come back if certain league officials are still in place. But, underneath the NAL currently, no new expansion teams have had any success unless they've started in a different league and then tried to come in and adapt. So, I mean, but Jersey's failed, Streets have failed, Fayetteville now, even before they went down to 6 teams, they were still struggling. And so I just don't know what else they can tap, what other markets that they haven't hit, what other ownership groups want to work with them. And so if the NAL has a future, as much as I like Chris, it's going to have to be it's going to be with a new commissioner, and Rob Storm's got to be completely 100% removed from that league 100%.
That fair takes on both points. Big Boy, what is your thought on the future of the NAL?
Well, I don't have much to say really about the future of the NAL right now. I mean, I I know we could throw out the hypothetical that Columbus could come back to the NAL, but I mean, at this time, we don't know what Columbus is going to do. They're still celebrating that AIFA championship they won. I mean, as far as expansion goes, I mean that could be anything. Who knows? The NAL does indeed die after the off season. You know, Jacksonville could end up probably in the IFL. If Jacksonville is one of those teams that if the NAL dies, teams are left stranded trying to look for somewhere else to go. Jacksonville will definitely go to like an IFL or something like that. San Antonio too, maybe. I don't know about Carolina, but I mean, again, there's just been a lot that's gone wrong, and I think we've hit all the points that a lot has gone wrong in the NAL over the years, and it's going to take a lot to fix them. So, yeah, that's basically it on that front.
Absolutely. That's fair. Dukon, speaking of Columbus Lions, check out Roar Lions Weekly by Dukon on his channel, Arena Football Statement. But go ahead with your thoughts on the future of the NAL.
Well, I will predict something, but keep in mind last year I predicted that the Northern Arizona Wranglers would be ranked number 14 out of 14 in the IFL, and they won the championship. So, I survived off of the humble pie diet for 3 months to get over that deal. So in making this prediction, just know that I suck at it. I agree with a lot of the points that Bryce had brought up. Absolutely. There's some things I disagree with, and I hope it doesn't end in a boxing match between us because given his Thor-like hair, we all know who would win that battle. Yes, there it is. There it is. Slow motion. All right. So my prediction, and I say this because I've had conversations that as many as 6 current teams are considering the NAL. Current teams from different leagues. Does that mean? And this was a few weeks ago. This was before the exodus or the announcements of the exodus of West Texas and Orlando. So it may have changed. It may have not. I'm aware of some teams that are looking to expand to the NAL. So there is interest there. So part of me thinks the night is always darkest just before the dawn. The NAL is going to learn a lot from this. I do agree with Bryce on the Rob Storm comments. Absolutely. I'm aware of several that just don't want anything to do with the NAL as long as Rob Storm is part of the leadership over there, given his litigation issues, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, there's no disrespect to the man by saying that. My prediction, though, is that the people that remain in the NAL are a resilient group, and they'll have some very tough conversations saying, what do we need to do to survive? I can very much see a 2024 being more of a survival year. But let's keep in mind something here. I did some research. The IFL's in their 15th season, and they've had 40 teams that have come and go in their first 15 years, right? And so everybody's like, what's wrong with the NAL? What are they, year 5, I think, year 6? And they've had a lot of teams come and go. And now let's talk about the NFL. They're going into their 102nd season. But in their first 15 years, they had 45 teams come and go. So everybody that's like the NAL is done. Everybody that's like the IFL or the CIF, they're fickle, they're unstable, they're just done. It's a learning experience. Vetting an ownership group is a learning experience. Part of vetting that ownership group is giving them a year to try it out. When it appears they suck, the vetting's been done, they're gone, right? And you get a few that prove that they can do it, and they stick with it. And eventually, after year 30 something in the NFL, they finally had teams stop folding, and they were able to be stable for a while because they didn't give up. And so it really depends on what the current ownership groups commissioner, etc., in the NAL does with this complete fallback. If they're resilient, they'll find a way to make the adjustments and continue on. If they're not resilient, they're just going to give up. And at that point, we can say, okay, yeah, the NAL's done. That's my thoughts.
That's completely fair. I mean, they're in a position now where it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. Going from 8 to 3 teams all in one season is extremely tough to come back from. Go ahead, Ralph.
I got to say something about that 8 to 3. It's just put out there. Yes, it's on social media. West Texas, how long have you been in the league? How many more years do you have on your contract with the league? What are the penalties for breaking that? Orlando, how many more years do you have left on this agreement? They are not free agents. There will be a price to pay to leave. And it will have to go through the courts. If they really, really, really want to go, I'm sure, where there's a will, there's a way. But it isn't going to be clean. Because if they leave and it takes down the league, there's a lot of people who are going to suffer damages from that breach of contract. And if the NAL implodes and explodes in the near future, it will explode with a long, slow trip through the civil court system. And I don't think anyone wants that. There are still contracts in place, folks. Just because somebody said it, just because it was posted to Twitter and Facebook and Insta, doesn't mean it's true. For Bryce, I think he'd agree with this. Just because it's posted there, all that gives me is a starting point for my investigation to confirm that or not confirm that. It's only a starting point. How many lines can you draw through one point? Infinite. At least get me another point so I can put a line through them. I've got to have 2, at least. And I need 3 to make a shape and 4 to make a 3-dimensional object. It's not
a great
solid.
point.
And who's posting? It's the same with the league. It's the same people posting over and over and over again. You would have think one of these cities, one of these venues would have posted something saying, yeah, we're real excited for their announcement and we've been promised this, that, or the other. This is feeling like a conspiracy of absolute silence. And we're all adults. We know conspiracies don't work because somebody always talks. Here we are talking about it. And if it's the same person, yes, I keep saying something. I'm hoping people believe it because the nostalgia will take over. Let's see. Let's see what happens. But there are contracts in place, and I'm not so sure that what has been said, when all is said and done, more will be said than done.
All right, I really want to jump in on this. After the sound effect, of course. Didn't mean to steal anybody's thunderous applause there, but all right. So there's a couple of things that are really interesting with what Dukan and Ralph just said. First of all, let's talk about contracts. So you have 3-year agreements in the NAL with certain standards and everything else along those lines. However, I don't believe that those contracts are as airtight as some other leagues and some other groups that I've seen, especially when the league itself is having so many problems to uphold its side of the contract. If there's a breach of contract, that can be leverage to get out of a deal for sustainability and viability. There is an amazing shot that both Orlando, San Antonio, West Texas, anybody can get out of that contract. And that's the first thing. The second thing is that if the league really wanted to not pursue it, they could just not pursue it, which comes into Dukan's point of who's coming in. If there's other groups that are breaking off, I alluded to one earlier in the show, that have multiple teams that are breaking out, and you've got only Jacksonville and only San Antonio with viability, what's the probability that you'll start your own league and those two join in not under the NAL banner instead. I think there's a more likely probability that it'd be a new league, new ownership, new understanding, all that stuff that merges these teams together. So now contracts are no longer applicable because the organization that fostered those contracts does not exist anymore. If that's the case, then you have the opportunity for all of these teams to jump ship, whether or not the NAL wants to pursue litigation against Orlando and West Texas for one reason or not is a different aspect, but I would love to see what league funds they're using to pay for that attorney, first off. And second, I ultimately, as these groups go, we do have precedent. Bloomington Edge, West Michigan, the CIF versus the IFL case. Letter of intent and contracts usually revert back to the league at whole. But I tell you what, the IFL and CIF historically have a lot stronger contracts than anything I've ever seen produced from the NAL. And I'm not a lawyer by any means. I have a legal certificate and I cover courts and crime. But it's not good. The NAL organizational model is not as good as some of these other leagues. I don't think that they'll have as strong as an opportunity to defend themselves if it actually gets to a litigation or even a discussion or mediation point. And that's a huge loss for the NAL's long-term viability and sustainability when they're looking to go into survival mode right now.
It might very well be a critical flaw.
If there's any way that these teams can remove themselves from these contracts without having to pay a buyout fee, then that instantly puts the NAL in some danger for sure. And that's a good point by Bryce. I did not think about the league's aspect of breach of contract, and that definitely could be leveraged. And I'm sure there's already been several points that could be brought up in court if it needed to be, to kind of fight back towards the NAL. Again, I wish nothing ill on the NAL. I hope they continue to survive. I hope all their teams continue to survive. You know, whether it's under the NAL banner or not doesn't particularly matter to me. And I don't mean any offense to anybody in that league. I just want to make sure that the teams, the people involved in those teams continue to thrive, because that's really what matters to me at the end of the day. I want the people who are investing their time, their energy, their life into these teams to continue to be able to do what they love. And that's really what scares me about this whole situation, is you could see some of these teams go away that were otherwise fairly stable. And that's the unfortunate side effect from all of these changes that we see coming. Chris, you've been kind of quiet for a little bit here. What are your thoughts on everything we just spoke about? Do you think you ultimately see only 3 teams from the NAL? Does Carolina go away? All that.
So, first off, I want to start off by saying, I know I talk a lot about the NAL, but, the NAL is how I first got into arena football. When we were in the NAL, it all comes full circle for me. The first team that we ever played was the Carolina Cobras. That's the first ever arena football game I went to. And it comes full circle because next week I'm going down to Greensboro to watch the Carolina Cobras. So, arena football as a whole, I know there's a lot of IFL versus NAL. If these two leagues could come together and they could form something, or they could figure out a way. I know it will never happen because they play by different rules and everything, but I feel like the sport could be so much stronger. We talk about it a lot where we have a lot of, people on their podcast not wanting to say the league's name or different things like that, but it's like we all want to see the sport succeed. We all want to be on TV. We all want to, make money from this, right? But the point is, when the sport is never going to be what I know it can be. I watch ESPN Plus. We talk about all the sports they have on there. They have cornhole. I can promise you arena football is a bit funner than cornhole. I can promise you arena football is, a bit funner than, I don't want to say it's a bit funner than women's soccer, but, I might have to go there because I'm not a huge soccer guy. But it's good quality football. And so, it's sad. It's sad if the NAL does go down. I know there was some talk about Rob Storm. Obviously, I'm a fan of Rob Storm because Rob Storm's a fan of the show, so he tunes in and stuff. So obviously, I'm not gonna comment on all that, but I think I met Rob Storm before, and he's a solid guy, but I think there's so many questions to be answered. The organizations can rise. San Antonio did it last year. San Antonio last year, the first couple of games was a train wreck, and then they figured it out and they got it together and they made something out of it, and they made something that those last couple of games last year they filled out that play. That was insane to see. They went from there to here. So it's possible. It's possible to build something. It's possible to everyone in these communities, like, who cares about these teams, even in Fayetteville, teams who are folded, like, they care. I mean, Saturday night, like, even you would think, because I'm out here in Massachusetts, right? There's a lot of stuff to do on a Saturday night. Honestly, though, if you look at it, there's not really a lot of stuff to do unless you have the money to go and catch a train and go to a Red Sox game, or have the money to go to, a Bruins game, or the only really cheap thing to do is to go to a Revolution game, honestly. And even that's like questionable to get into. So there's not really many affordable options. They're not. I mean, there's concerts, but there's hardly any concerts around my area. So this is like a big thing. And if more people knew about it, it could grow. Like, and I would hate to see the NAL fall. I really would, but if the AFL comes back and it comes back stronger, then the NAL will have to fall. It will, because that's the only option for the sport. And so overall, my biggest thing is it's going to determine on how invested these owners are in long-term success. It's going to determine if we're going to have owners in this business who want to invest the money, who want to stay in, and not after a year just quit. And so it's sad to me to see so many teams drop, and we joke about it like they drop like flies and everything, but it's hard. I mean, it's hard on the players, it's hard on the coaches. I mean, I know players from Fayetteville who have retired. I'll give you an example, right? Walter Thomas, right? He's someone who's come on my show. He's a great guy. Like, he's someone who played arena football for a long time, and now he's out there in West Texas, finished out his career. He still hasn't been paid by Fayetteville, and so he has to, this is his last year. His last year shouldn't have to end like that, it really shouldn't. But it's unfortunate. And I want all the good teams in the NAL to jump over the IFL. I'm all in on that. I'm all in on San Antonio, Carolina, Jacksonville jumping over the IFL. I really think that would be great. Now, will it happen? Probably not. The only team I could legitimately see jumping over is San Antonio, because they have talks about previously bringing a San Antonio team to the IFL. So that was in discussion until the owner they selected went to jail. But I think it just, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope for the sport in general. But the NAL as a league, they need to really sit down, look in the mirror, evaluate themselves. I don't know why they can't just merge with the CIF. I really don't understand that. Like, those two leagues are killing themselves by not merging with each other. They could really form something real great by combining those two leagues. I mean, can you imagine Omaha Beef for Jacksonville Sharks? Like, that would be crazy. That would be a really good game to watch, But, I mean, these two, they need to come together. Or the AFIA, the new league coming, I think that league has, I know those 14, it's weird to have a 14 league, but wouldn't it be cool if, like, the NAL absorbed those 4 teams or something like that, which wouldn't happen because all these new leagues pop up out of nowhere. I had someone tell me the other day, oh, you have to look out for the GDEFL. It's going to boom. All these teams are going to come and join us. I'm like, what are you even talking about? I've never even heard of the league. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm with this team. And I'm like, do they even have a Facebook page? And he's like, yeah, they do. We've sold out half our season tickets. I'm like, going to the Facebook page. It's not even active. They have one post. The logo is blurry. There's no website. I'm like, what do you mean half your season tickets? Like, where is that even coming from? They're just pulling numbers out of thin air. No, I'm serious. Like, we sold half our season tickets. We have a passionate fan base. We have owners who are really rich. They're billionaires. I'm like, if they're billionaires, they would be in the AFL, not in the CDEFL. So the NAL needs to figure it out, but if they can't, they just have to close up shop, unfortunately.
I have to agree with you, Krish. This is the end of the day, it's a business. The market will determine what will and will not thrive. And if the NAL is critically faulted, if the NAL has reached a point of system failure, something needs to emerge. I feel bad for all the fan bases. But at the end of the day, every single league is really working for their ownership and is made up by their ownership. If it's what the owners want to do, that's what the league wants to do. If the owners want to support something, the league can make it happen. If the owners don't want to support it, it's not going to happen. And if it comes down to a choice between staring into the blank void of no longer appearing and going one more year by making some painful changes and admitting you failed and go to another league, okay, that's what they're going to have to do. But these owners, they're very successful people. They feel that they are successful and they know how to run things successfully. But a lot of times, I'm afraid it falls into the category of ego. They do not think that they can fail because they believe themselves to be infallible. They've overcome so many things, and they're just going to figure out a way to overcome this because this is just one more problem. But there's a bigger market. There's a bigger history.
100%. We got a quick guest, surprise guest who has not joined this show in particular, actually. So, Michael Washington, how you doing this morning, man?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. How are you? I was listening to the show while I'm working a little bit, and I figured I'd stop real quick and give my 2 cents on stuff. I haven't met some of you before, so, I mean, hats off to you guys doing great work. Appreciate the assistance and whatnot. But I wanted to give comments a little bit about the NAL and the state that they're in. I'm not as in touch with, like, connections as far as the NAL is concerned with, owners and players and stuff, but from a fan perspective and from a standpoint of what I do know about the leagues and what I have gathered with information that I know from people, the problem, it sounds like a majority of the NAL is ego driven. And when you have a league that is so ego driven in a standpoint of wanting power, it's not going to be sustainable. Sure, the NAL has always found a way around it. Whether you're talking 9 teams or 6 teams or 7 teams or 3 teams, whatever it is, the NAL has always found a way to be able to persevere and continue on under that banner. But, and like, I think it was Ducon, I think you said earlier that you did a little research and it was like 40 some odd teams inside the first 15 years inside the NFL and the IFL as well, has had, those a lot of issues as well when you're talking about a league that's starting up. So at least that gives some hope for the NAL. The problem, I think, in this situation is if the AFL is legit, and I say if it's legit because some people have alluded to some things, around here as far as like, is it really going to be legit? But if the AFL is legit, I feel that their playing style is too close in a sense that the NAL is necessarily going to survive. The NAL might be able to do a sense of like hang around like a CIF is to the IFL type of situation, or however you want to look at those as far as the indoor world is concerned. But with everything else that's been happening with the NAL, I feel like every year with the NAL, it's something. There's always some kind of story that's coming out, whether it's a team folding or something happens or a controversy takes place. Like the New York streets issue was an absolute nightmare years ago. The NAL somehow preserved through that, but the streets were absolutely, that whole situation was awful. But honestly, I'm not even sure if 2020 doesn't happen if the NAL doesn't ever really truly honestly bounce back from that, to be honest with you, because everybody was canceled in 2020. So it kind of gave these teams and leagues a chance to regroup a little bit, you know? So I would hate to see it for the NAL because, like Chris said on his comments, the NAL is kind of what got me a little bit started into this. I found out about the IFL through the NAL, and one of the first games I ever watched was an NAL championship game, which was like one of the best NAL championship, like best indoor games I had ever seen, and I had watched the AFL. So the NAL kind of got me back into the arena side of things, and it would be really unfortunate if they did fold, but like Bryce had said, there's certain people inside the NAL that may need to go, and they may need to revamp and strip it all the way down and kind of rebuild it back up in order to really hopefully survive. Just a few of my cents there. Like I said, I'm not as well connected. So, Ducon did mention that there was 3 teams that he has talked to that are looking to try to get into the NAL, or 6 teams that are looking to possibly get into the NAL, which is awesome if it's true, as far as like if they're able to sustain and get into it. But I think losing West Texas and Orlando, when everything that happened with Albany this year, especially with what happened with Albany this year, is definitely going to make it difficult for the NAL to rebound, at least inside a year since. So
I would definitely agree. There's going to be a lot of upheaval in the indoor football world this offseason. So we were definitely in for a very, very eventful year. I would say no matter how everything goes down. I mean, we've already seen so much happen with the NAL. A lot happened with the IFL, the CIF. There's only more to come, quite honestly. So let's go ahead and get everybody's final thoughts, kind of wrap this up, put a bow on it, and then we'll give everybody their day. I know Ralph has to get to the game to go call some plays. So let's go ahead and go with him first.
First of all, thank you, Sam, for the opportunity to even be on this podcast. Other than defense, I don't think I've had a lot of interactions. Big Boy, I know I've run across you and Sam on Discord. I believe very strongly in the free market. I believe that there is a desire and a passion for this product, whether we call it indoor or whether we call it arena, that is special. There is really no other sport that invites you to come onto the field at the end of the game. There's no other sport where you're able to yell at the players on the field and they're able to hear you and yell back. There's nothing as intimate. This is family friendly. What professional sport can you say is really family friendly that doesn't have a bunch of hooligans and thugs? What sport do you have out there that you can go and take your family for under $100 to a game to? My ownership group, John Wayne, the owner, Don Rackler, when I asked him, what's the message? What is this all about? He said, this is a give back to the working class people of San Antonio who cannot afford a ticket to the Spurs. They cannot afford a ticket and transportation and a hotel to go to Dallas, to go to Houston. It's not within their reach. And so they're on the outside. They don't have a team they can truly root for except by way of, I give you my money so I can wear a jersey. With the Gunslingers and with every other team, I'm pretty sure in all of the leagues, it is not that expensive to go to. It is not that expensive to be a part of, and you can be a part of it. I'm trying to put together something in the NAL called the League Recognized Volunteer Program so that people can volunteer with their local team. That gives them more hands. In exchange, their name goes up on the webpage as a recognized volunteer so people can put that on their resume of their experience and help their marketing. What does it cost the NAL? A couple more names on the website. A couple more pixels. And yeah, as a perk, if you can go to wherever the championship game is and you're a league volunteer, they'll give you a ticket and sit you in a section and the camera might be on you and the PA might say something. These are the league recognized volunteers. Because everyone now who is a super hardcore, die hard, I'm doing this for nothing, which is everyone on this page. including me. You are volunteering right now for your league and for your team. We need more of you. But sorry, there's only so many of us crazy, hardcore diehards that are willing to do it. So other people need other incentives, outside recognition, a chance to go to a championship game. That'll be a few more people that come in. And so that's my vision as to what all these leagues can do to expand is recognize the importance of volunteers, and all of you are volunteers. And when you get more of those, more work gets done. The level of everything rises, costing the league nothing. And that's it.
I really like that idea. In fact, I think that's an idea that every league should institute, because there are diehard fans for every one of these leagues that would happily volunteer their time to go to games, to help with game day operations, and already do. But to get that little bit of recognition might pull even more people in to be involved. And I definitely know that, if it's something you could put on a resume, it make me more likely to go and volunteer my time with maybe a team up in Gillette, or something like that. It's a 10-hour drive that I might not be motivated to make if not for that recognition and something I could put on a resume. So that's a great point.
But you'd be able to do it without making that 10-hour drive, by participating in virtual meetings for marketing, I mean, my goodness, COVID taught us we can do a lot of work remotely. Take advantage of that lesson and do work for the team. Everyone here is doing something for a team just by blogging, just by being out there, just by being engaged. The team's not doing that. The team's not responding to it. And you're probably sharing information that they might have seen out in the world of social media with the team, so the team can react to it. It really, the internet has made this possible in a way that it never was. Sure, you may have to go to a game, and you may have to hold a radio, and you may have to say, hey, players, come out on the field right now, or you might be loading up the t-shirt cannon, so you may not get to see the game very much, but you are there. And how cool would it be is if you all had a hat that said, I've envisioned a league volunteer with the NAL logo underneath it, or something like that, that's merchandise that you get. And people say, well, what's that? Well, it's the league volunteer program. How do you get involved? I mean, people will do it for the hat and the recognition, and to feel that they're not crazy. So yeah, that's, I guess my contribution, and now I've shared it with all the other leagues, and maybe somebody will implement it. And
100%.
And it'll
I hope they do. I hope they do. So for anybody who tuned in, anybody who's watching, make sure you catch Ralph later on today in about 6 hours approximately to call the San Antonio Gunslingers games against the Carolina Cobras. So it should be a great game today. I'm sure it's going to be real competitive. Make sure you tune in. Again, all games for the NAL are on YouTube. Let's go to Albany Defense Kid next. What are your final thoughts for the day?
I mean, I guess it's kind of like a hazy moment where you don't know what's happening with any of the leagues, especially like the AFL, because of what their like process is and like not having all this stuff. And then the NAL, like with the futures of these two leagues. But I mean, it's just going to be a crazy couple of years coming up where we have the new and improved AFL that we also don't know if it's new and improved. And then the NAL, who's going to maybe have 2 or 3 teams next year. But I mean, there is some like light to this. I mean, I was on my local Spectrum News thing for being fans, and my grandpa was there, and I'll probably link it somewhere. But I mean, we brought in all this stuff, and like a lot of stuff. I mean, like stuff that my grandpa collected over the past 30 years or so, because he worked with the Firebirds, he worked with the Conquest, and then, I mean, I said there, I mean, I guess back in the day, my grandpa was like, oh yeah, sure. Well, like, hey, arena football's back. You want to come in? I'm like, ah. And I guess my family was like, sure, he'll like it. And I didn't like it. mainly because of the kiss cam. Don't ask me why. But besides that, I mean, it's, I mean, I mean, but I mean, arena football, I think is my favorite sport. It used to be baseball, now it's arena football, and I think that there's going to be a future of it where the NAL is going to be like a big, like, I think the NAL, I don't think it's going to be kind of like what, I don't know who said it, but it's going to be like, the NAL is going to be like a kind of like smaller, like AFL. I mean, with the rules they have in place, and if the AFL does have the same rules in effect, except, I don't know, but the, and like how the IFL is with the CIF, but I don't really watch those leagues like the IFL and CIF because really the NAL I feel like is just better than what it was. But I mean, going back to the interview that I did, it was fun, and I got to take home some things, including, yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, my grandpa worked for the Booster Club, so he was the president. He was the previous fan in the stands, and he has stuff like this. He has autographed footballs. He has all of that, and he is probably one of the like big historians of like that you, but and I mean he's great. I mean I don't know, but I mean that's pretty much it. I mean, um, uh, I guess all I can say now is just go follow me on Twitter at this week in Arena Ball. That's it. I mean, I just got to plug myself there, but I mean, Thank you for having me, and that was fun. Thank you.
Absolutely. Also, check out his YouTube channel right here. Make sure you subscribe to that as well. Let's go to Bryce next.
We talked a little bit about workers' compensation issues, and I don't know if I'm stealing Ducon's thunder here because I saw him wearing the shirt a little bit earlier, but Bismarck Bucks is one of the teams in one of the states in North Dakota that will be really important to watch for new legislation at the state level that will provide smarter understanding of workers' compensation in minor league sports. And if that's the case, Albany and New York as a state will have a better opportunity to change their issues when moving forward. This would be a big win for both players as a way to get better compensation as well as protection for the physical aspects of their roles in the games that they play, which include baseball, because I know that Fargo is really, really influential in this from a minor league sports standpoint in North Dakota right now. And if this passes, it would be something that would be really big for all of us. I would encourage anybody that enjoys taking a look on the legal side of things to maybe look at those bills that are going through right now.
Definitely huge to hear that Bismarck got that deal passed and that they may hopefully be able to return. That's big news. You know, nobody wanted to see them go under ultimately, and we're lucky to hear that they might actually be back in 2024. Let's go to Big Boy next. What were your final thoughts for the day?
All right, man. Let me tell y'all. I originally wanted to do something like this, but Sam was like, you know what? Let me get on this first. You know, so I wanted to get all y'all together and everything like that, but I'll save that for another date. The AFL, man. Again, I'm just as blindsided as all y'all. I haven't really said too much today, and that's fine because I'm just kind of, I was kind of blindsided by everything. You know, like this whole announcement blindsided me as far as, you know, the NAL's viability, survivability, whatever you want to call it. I hope the league survives. That's really what anybody wants. That's what everybody here wants, is for the NAL to survive into 2024. We can talk about the NAL into 2024, just be having a good time with that and stuff like that. I know there's just been so much, that has gone on this year that has been, it's been crazy. It's been a crazy 2023 season in all the leagues, really, not just the NAL. It's been a crazy year, and glad to be here for the ride with all y'all for the third consecutive year. You know, like the debates, we could stop the debates. It's kind of like Defense Kid. You might know this. It's like the PLL versus NLL debate, or like the AEW versus WWE debate, or like the XFL USFL debate. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. It's all indoor arena football. It's all enjoyable, family friendly, affordable, beautiful. It's the 50-yard fight. It's the 50-yard fight, and I love every second of it. Again, I'm hoping that the NAL survives into 2024. Whether we're still with these same 5 teams plus expansion, or maybe Orlando and West Texas actually do end up leaving, or we're down to just 3, and some expansion happens, or Columbus comes back or something like that. All sorts of different hypotheticals and possibilities exist, and whatever happens. We're all gonna keep up with it during the off season. We're all gonna keep up with it. Again, hopeful that the NAL survives. You can find me, of course, on YouTube at Big Boy Sports. You can also find me on Twitter at MLNation0001. That's about it. That's all I gotta say. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, for the record, Big Boy, if you do end up doing a collab episode, you can count me in. I'll be there. I just wanted to throw out there that this was kind of the design of this show from the very beginning. I mean, you were on very early in the season, so you're aware. But we always kind of wanted to bring on different not characters, but different content creators. Sorry, that's a better way to put it. But different content creators to provide different viewpoints. Because let's be honest, not all of us have the same thought process on all these different leagues. One of us might think the IFL is better, the other might think the NAL bet is better. Some might think the CIF is better, but realistically, like you said, Big Boy, and it's a great sentiment that I'm going to echo, that we just need to support all these leagues. If we support the leagues, they can all stick around. And then maybe we all have multiple teams in our states, and we can have all kinds of football, year-round football, which realistically, what's the complaint with that? And with that being said, Krish, I know you've got some final thoughts. I also know that you've probably got about 50 million interviews coming over the next week. So what are your final thoughts, and what is your next interview coming up?
So, arena football presents opportunity to everyone. It's why Shady wakes up at 5:30 to get the show set up. It's why Ralph, calls games. It's why Ducon creates content. It's why Big Boy has his YouTube channel. It's why Defense Kid has a Twitter page. It's why I do interviews, right? We love this sport. We care about it. It's why Bryce writes for the local newspaper, to cover it and to give the real truth. And so we all love this sport. We're all bought in. We're all invested. And I can tell you, arena football has taught me so much, not just about, about the sport. It's about, putting your political views aside and coming together for one common goal, really. I mean, looking at people for, what they're passionate about, not necessarily what they believe. And, in the world we live in, we look at people, oh, what are their views? What are this? What is that? But, we don't oftentimes look at the character they are. What kind of person they are. And so the sport gives us the ability to do that. And so, for me, obviously I talk about this, but a couple of weeks ago, I started as a coaching intern with the Pirates, right? I learned so much about accountability, being on time, showing up prepared, bringing the notebook, everything my mom has been telling me for years, I learned in a week. You know what I mean? Just by doing that, by realizing, what it's like to be 15 minutes late to a meeting and be walking into a room, full of offensive linemen and quarterbacks, and everyone like turning around and being like, oh, like, I'm a little late, and I have to make an excuse about how there's traffic or something, even though, I was busy playing video games. But it teaches you all that, it teaches you about how invested you have to be. You have to be invested in it and you have to love it. And we all love the sport. That's why we cover it. But the sport can grow. It has potential. I will always stand by it. That's why, I want to be a coach in the sport. I want to be involved in the sport for the long term. And everyone enjoys it. So I told my uncle, right? Like, my uncle is very skeptical about arena football. I told him about the Pirates. He's like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, they're an indoor football team. He's like, what's indoor football? And I'm like, well, why don't you come to a game? And like for years, and like he wasn't sold on coming to a game. Finally, I got him and my 9-year-old cousin to come to a game. Second game of the season. They loved it. They had a blast. When's the next game? Next week? Oh, we can be there. Like all bought in. They love it. I brought my other uncle to a game. He's come to every single Pirates game all season because he's a huge fan. He has a shirt, hat, t-shirt, everything. So, I think when people see how exciting it is, they love it. Like I get a lot of, oh, what league is that? Semi-pro? Like, I'm like, no, they're not semi-pro. Like, what sport can you, after Khalid Rashad catches a game-winning touchdown, what sport can you message him on Facebook and he responds? Well, what sport is that? I mean, no sport, so it presents so many opportunities and it brings people together. And so I really hope that we can all come to a common goal and realize we all want to see this to the top. We all want to see where this can get to. We all want to see stuff like Tulsa. We all want to be like Tulsa. We all want to sell out our stadiums. We all want to, see people at the game we know. We all want to see, when I sit in school and I pull up, the AFL transactions, I have so many kids turn around and be like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, the transaction report. Oh, what's the transaction report? Like, they're interested. Like, man, the screen is cool. Like, there's so much stuff going on. And I'm like, yeah, this is how we keep track of what players sign and release and everything. And, like, they're like, oh, man, this seems really cool. Like, what sport is this? And they have, like, no idea about it at all. And I'm like, these guys are what you want to be. These guys have played D1. These guys have been in the NFL. Sure, they were there for a training camp or a preseason, but they were still there. They still made it. If the reality is, a lot of these guys are borderline NFL players, or borderline, we talk about XFL, USFL. Before the XFL and USFL, there was arena football. The NAL was still there before all these leagues came up. So where were all those players that are in the XFL now? They were in the NAL. They were in the IFL, right? So all these players once had played here. They're the reason why Terrell Owens came and played. Maybe, due to the money, but still, he still wanted to live out the dream. And so I think once everyone opens their eyes and looks at this with an open mind and open perspective, this sport will eventually bloom. And I hope to be involved with it. And as far as my interviews, I got one dropping with Ehrlich Jones. I got Ernesto Lacayo coming on tomorrow. I got like a whole slew coming. So, I do a bunch of interviews and I drop them on different days, pre-recorded, different things like that. So, I probably have an article coming here soon about offensive linemen. So, just keep an eye out on my stuff, stay plugged in. And, I'm excited to keep producing content. And I might have a vlog video coming on my trip to North Carolina next week. So, we're talking to the NAL about that, but keep an eye out, and yeah.
You should definitely do that if they'll allow you to. That's going to be awesome. Speaking of which, for anybody who didn't catch that, Chris kind of briefly breezed over it. We do the Carolina Cobras Coaches Show here on Shady Sports Network, and he will be in Greensboro for the last game of the season next week to interview players, most likely at the arena. So it's going to be kind of a cool touch for our show this upcoming week. Not this Sunday, but next Sunday. So definitely tune in for that. Make sure you tune in tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Dukan, are you still with us? If so, I wanted to give you an opportunity to give your final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much. Man, final thoughts. I'll try to wrap it up really tight here. First of all, number one, I love you guys. You're great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to interact with all of you. Man, there's some great ending speeches that just kind of leaving me with a little bit of goosebumps, and it's a tough act to follow, to be right honest with you. But number two, we're in for a tumultuous off season. I'm actually excited to see what happens here, to see where different teams go and markets and what happens with this AFL stuff. Really excited about that. I'm really excited for some playoff football tonight. I'm just going to throw this out there. I got Arizona beating Northern Arizona, Bay Area over Tucson, Frisco over Sioux Falls, and finally Mass getting a road win it was Frisco over QC, Quad City, and Mass over Sioux Falls. Really, really excited to see a little bit of NAL action tonight. Ralph's going to have a fun time calling that game there, but I'm going to say San Antonio has another 1-point win right at the end of the game. So we'll see what happens there. Chris is going to fight me for it, but I'd rather a boxing match with him than Bryce. So guys, it's exciting. Thank you for letting me be here. Thank you, Sam. You're a fantastic moderator for putting all this together. Really, really cool to see journalists get together and people that are passionate about the game, volunteers get together and actually contribute to the game that we love out of our passion and out of what's in our heart, and hope we continue.
It's been a pleasure having you on all season. I honestly, everything I say about your channel, your editing skills, all of that, I truly mean it. Your content, as well as everybody else who is here, is next level. And there's a reason why I wanted to collab with all of you guys. I mean, you truly have been here long before I was, and I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to affect anybody else's audience or market. In my mind, there's enough room for us all to grow together. And one way of doing that is shows like this. If we all work together, we're exposing each other to new audiences, and we will all grow together. And that's my ultimate goal, because if we grow, the sport grows, because each one of us is also doing our part to bring in new fans. And that's realistically what this is all about. That's why we wanted to cover all three leagues together, as far as the CIF, IFL, and the NAL. Now with the AFL and all these other leagues popping up, maybe the names change a little bit, but yeah, this show is going to continue probably up until, like, I would say a week after all the championship games, and then we'll probably go dormant for a little bit during the off season, but definitely we'll be back next season, or at least I have every intention of being back. So all of you guys who tuned in today, thank you so much for watching. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, comment, subscribe to all these channels. I mean, This Week in Arena Ball, Big Boy Sports, ZO Productions, Shady Sports Network. Ralph, I'm assuming you don't have a channel yourself, so make sure you go subscribe to the NAL channel to watch all the games that Ralph calls. And with that in mind, thank you all for tuning in, and we will leave you with a quick word from our sponsor.
Get in the game at BetUS, America's favorite sports book. Over 50 sports, live betting, online casino, horse racing, esports, and more. Start now and enjoy easy deposits, fastest payouts, and the biggest bonuses. And for over 25 years, BetUS is a name you can trust. Mention TV 150 now and get up to 150% in bonuses. BetUS, we've got your game. Call or visit BetUS.com now to join.
I'm a game changer. I'm a game changer.